Right, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. So I'd like to introduce Stephanie. She is one of the artists featured, one of two artists that are featured in our current exhibition, Amend. And Stephanie, I'll give a little bit about her background, that she has a dual science degree at Cornell University. She attended Maryland Institute of College of Art. She's exhibited nationally, internationally, published nationally, internationally. She is the Hamiltonian Gallery Fellow, National Park Service Artist in Residence in the Everglades, and she's a recipient of the Puffin Foundation of Environmental Art Grant. So very accomplished. We're excited that your work is here with us. And bringing such an incredible dialogue with the other artist's work, Lindsey Schmitt, as part of Amend. So I'll turn it over to Stephanie and we'll hear about her work. If you do have questions, there is the chat feature that if you have questions during the process, you can include it in the chat. And if there's an opportunity to chime in, then we can sort of facilitate, either Matthew or I can facilitate asking those questions. And then otherwise we can save some questions for the end of the talk and then go from there. So thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Amy, for hosting me today and for making this show happen. I also want to thank the College of the Sequoias for helping to support the show. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now. If you're just joining us, you're welcome to follow this along either through my Instagram Live, but if you'd like to see the pretty pictures, you probably want to follow the College of the Sequoias link. And they're also posting through Facebook. Let me take a second and share the slideshow. So this particular show was my COVID show. So you heard from artists, or maybe you are yourself a practicing artist, about all the delays and just really the world stopped, right? And the art world echoes what's going on in the real world. It's a snapshot of it. And so a lot of artists really got hit hard, right? Exhibitions were closed, venues closed. This was supposed to take place about 2 years ago. And so it's really been an interesting journey for me just to get to this point. So thank you all today for being part of it and for hanging out. I'm going to talk a little bit about the work, which is offshoots of some of my older work and a very much based in a structural or a sculptural practice. So speaking of COVID, what can I say? I'm based in Baltimore. I consider myself an environmental artist, and my work focuses on humanity's interruption of nature. So a lot of times I juxtapose industrial elements like steel against nature elements, sticks, twigs, fragmites, stones. And I do that to kind of expose these two dichotomies: formality and fragility, and permanence and impermanence. I bring, especially in this case, the College of the Sequoias, these natural elements inside the gallery to try and create this dialogue about nature, to create these personal connections that maybe not everyone kind of stops or pauses to consider through their day. And when I do that, it's kind of in junction with the Art Povera or the Manoha movement to investigate the themes of claim, who's claim to these objects, who claims these objects, how they are claimed, women's labor, and then time. So I mentioned the whole kind of delay with COVID, and what I initially envisioned when I pitched the show to Amy, the gallery director, was actually a COVID vacation. So I envisioned flying out to California, building this interactive, immersive work inside of the beautiful gallery there, large scale pieces, right? And then it became very clear to me that that was not going to happen. And so I quickly took a look at a couple things. I considered my own environmental or carbon footprint, right? It's a much smaller footprint, right? A decrease in mileage, a decrease in gas emitted by the car, the metro, the plane that I would have had to take to head out there. Is a total decrease in energy usage. And also, to be really blunt, it was an economic advantage to not go out there and to work. The college felt some of the brunt of COVID. I don't know any person or any community, especially academic community, that didn't. And so my whole budget changed for this show. And so what started out as this grandiose vision and paradise escape for me quickly became kind of whittled down to this handheld, literally this handheld show. And so I ended up a couple weeks ago fitting all of the pieces into 3 boxes. And so that's what you can see in front of you. You see at least 2 of the boxes. And I did the whole Ruth Asawa descriptions along with them, so that to help the students and help Amy do the installation. So for me, as a very tactile person and somebody who needs to be constantly sourcing nature materials and welding and holding my artwork, this became kind of my tearing my heart out and sending it on a plane and hoping that everything would come out of these 3 boxes okay. I'm sure Amy has some backstories to some of that. So, this whole show really got started by my looking back a little bit. And I did this piece about a year or so ago called Undercurrent. It's a 13, 14 foot long, I can't even call it a mural, it's a drawing. It's comprised of steel, it's done on paper using two different materials, using charcoal, which I made, and beets, literally just raw beet, and then peeled and used as kind of a writing utensil to make these marks. And so Undercurrent became this kind of visual, you could see it's a visual stream of consciousness for me through a really freaking rocky year. And this show, Amend, couldn't have been better named because all the pieces that I'll present today and that are exhibited spun off of this piece. So I have 2 parts of it, and I try to break it down to show you that we have this base that's made of the paper and charcoal and beet, and then there's an overlay of this grid-like thing, a map, and that's welded steel, galvanized steel cable. And this to me was inspired by these ancient Polynesian maps, these maps that the seafarers would use, right? It's an area where there are 1,000 little islands everywhere. And to get from one place to the next, especially 1,000 years ago, they didn't have Google Maps. Okay, they didn't have Waze. So, but they knew the water and they knew the land so well that they would take these sticks and they would rope them together with some bark or with some grass. They would take seashells and put them on kind of these intersections, and it would mark, it would be a handheld map. And I found them just so curious, and no 2 are the same. If you Google them, they're just these really detailed, intricate, intimate, to me, pieces of art, and clearly about finding your way. And to me, they're about finding my way, and served as a model for this. And so what kind of spun off to me is, well, you know, there are a lot of ways to go. And one of the first things that came to mind is, again, that geographic distance between our coast, between my being in Baltimore on the East Coast, and College of Sequoias being in the Northwest, and understanding that, you know, while we all share trees, they're really different on the different coasts. And just by virtue of the college name, Sequoia, I mean, Sequoia is a name that it's a scientific generic name given to redwoods, right? On this coast, we know them more as redwoods as Sequoia than sequoias, but you know, redwoods are considered Sequoia gigantea, right? So they're huge trees. But the really cool part about it to me is, as I thought about the show, is that link that, you know, here I was when I kind of started dreaming about this. I was right in the middle of the show at Honfleur Gallery in Anacostia in DC. And I had gathered 40 bags, 40 bags that were 3 cubic feet each, and of pine needles, of these loblolly pine needles. And I had gathered those for about a year. And just that link was really strong to me, both in terms of my own labor, in terms of the labor of gathering them, and what we shared, especially environmentally, that when we have this kind of human interference with the environment, with climate change, that no matter what coast we're on, we're finding deforestation, right? We have a decrease in the redwoods, we have a decrease in the loblolly pines. And that by kind of showing that with this brace, right? It is raw metal teeth, right? And it's hard to see from this angle, but enclosing, confining the pine needles, that as kind of, as humanity, we're shaping that. We're shaping these cycles that shed the needles, and again, that's something we have in common. The other goal also with my art is always to kind of connect and connect to the viewer. And pine needles are something that, you know, we stomp on. We can talk about claim if we want, and time, like how the color changes over time. But it's also symbolic of something that a lot of us can relate with, or relate to, and that is food and eating. And I'm a huge breakfast person. I love brunch. I love pancakes, and sometimes waffles, but mostly pancakes. Okay, so pancakes. What do we love? We can't have plain pancakes, right? You gotta have, and especially in the South, you have syrup, right? You have syrup on, well, some parts around here, we have chicken and waffles, and anyway. So you gotta have syrup. And so where does syrup come from, right? This is something you don't have to study. You don't have to read like an environmental journal to understand this, that, okay, Sunday brunch, you gotta have your pancakes. You get your syrup, pour it on. Well, here's the thing. Where does syrup come from? Syrup comes from maple, right? It's maple syrup, maple trees. Well, if the maple trees, okay, are dying off, okay, and there's a scientist out of Boston University, and what she has documented with almost 60 years of data shows that the whole cycle of trees has changed, that it's called the freeze-thaw cycle, has been shortened. And so that snow, which used to be like this blanket on the trees and protect the roots, isn't there. You all don't probably get to see that so much on the West Coast. On the East Coast, we see that, right? We had like one snow day this year, one ice day kind of thing. And that's, you know, it's changed. So, okay, so back to the little analogy, this connection, right? We have fewer trees. Fewer trees means, well, less product, right? It's harder to make maple syrup. Well, it's harder to make maple syrup. The price goes up. Well, if the price goes up, it's going to be harder to get. And certainly now, especially with gas right now, to try and get the maple syrup, it's going to cost us a lot more. And so all of a sudden, just by thinking about kind of this one thing, our relationship to trees, okay, we have this really integral, this really important triangle, right? It's this sustainability triangle. It's people, it's place, it's economy, right? And we're impacted. We want our syrup, man. We want our syrup on Sunday mornings. So, it's how we each connect. I'm gonna move on. I put SCORE in there as kind of a personal piece. SCORE is made of the same galvanized steel cable welded together and integrated with these black walnuts. These black walnuts are about the size of your palm, okay? And they're amazing seed pods. They have this, you know, hard as rock exterior. They have a kind of fleshy interior. And then all of that is still protecting this pretty intense second shell on the inside. I mean, it's very, very similar to, you know, ancient Egyptian mummies in terms of the layering and the protection, right? And what are they protecting? This like beautiful, delicious walnut. And as enchanted as I am with these things, my vice during COVID was running. And so I would run every day. And where in Baltimore, where I'm at, you know, there are these black walnut trees everywhere. And so picture kind of like roller skating. Like I just kept tripping over them. And so it became very clear to me that I needed to investigate these things, that, yeah, I'm, you know, I need to be better balanced too while running. But when we talk about the show, and we talk about kind of things that influenced me as I am exploring these different materials, sometimes it comes down to something as easy as that. And so what you see is almost like this segment of the original, that original mural pulled out and highlighted. So instead of like those Polynesian seamen would use seashells, I decided this is kind of my running map to use these black walnuts. Remit is about assumptions of land claim. I have this really long, probably about 13 feet, galvanized steel cable that's welded and kind of splayed at the end. And when I was doing this, I couldn't help but, again, think of kind of cycles. To me, it could be a metaphor for so many things, like a robotic hand letting go, a robotic hand reaching towards nature. It could be a fallopian tube in terms of that whole Mother Nature sort of like analogy. There are a lot of different ways of looking at this. But what the heart of it is to me is actually about the felled red oak that's there. It's a slice that I found or recovered, maybe didn't steal, from some land in the Green Mountains. Green Mountains are in Vermont. And this land was what I thought was kind of protected land. It's a state park, right? We know the Green Mountains, it's supposed to be protected by the government. And they were doing construction on it, and like long-term massive construction. So I would go for my run. When I was up there, I was working on another art project, and I would go back and cross across this land that was like, you know, like devastation. It was just oak after oak after oak that had been felled, and there's still machinery there in some of the parts. And I finally like went back and at night because I knew that there would be like surveillance and stuff. And I got a couple pieces of this of the red oak. And I did some research, and the research was really interesting to me because, okay, yeah, maybe I was stealing it, but again, when we investigate claim and whose is it? Was it mine? Is it mine? Should it be in a gallery right now? Was it mine to kind of borrow? Did the construction company lay claim to it? And then who originally owned, or can people own land, right? And what about the indigenous cultures that are still there, that are 2 miles away from where this kind of devastation took place? So there are all these questions about claim, and so I really did this research, trying to find out kind of the history more in that specific area, the trees and land and the legislation. What the legislation shows is that even if we call it a state park, or even if we call it a national park, right, it is up to local jurisdiction for what happens to the land. And so, when we talk about these indigenous cultures and trying to kind of reclaim land that was initially theirs or part of the community, we get into, from what I've seen time and time again, and at least in the past 3 projects that I've worked on, there are journals that go back to like 1800s, 1900s, that show all these cases get caught up in legislation. And it's very interesting to me. And obviously there's a lot of environmental justice and social justice issues that get tied in. Last piece I wanted to share was Artifact. Artifact kind of carries some of those same themes as the preceding image. It's ironic, right? It's the idea of what could be a part of a tree or a piece of a tree, and kind of what's left. And it's made out of bronze intentionally because of the lost wax casting process, where you actually carve this piece, and then to fill it with bronze, you have a cavity, you have this emptiness. And so to kind of wrap this up and to wrap up kind of my thoughts on it, where I ended up is kind of what will humanity, what will you as a visitor to the show, what will you end up filling that cavity with? Will you fill it with more metal and cement? Will you fill it with seeds for another tree? But lots of kind of analogies there, and ways of exploring and considering it. So I had a great time with this exhibit, and again, I want to thank the gallery so much for your support, for seeing it through, for persevering through such a odd time. I have a couple minutes. I'd love to answer questions, and happy to chat with you a little bit. If you're interested at all in my work, please feel free to explore. I keep up with Instagram at Garon Studio. I also have a website at www.garonstudio.com. I have some really cool projects coming up. Next week, I head up to Maine again to keep going with my mine core project. These cores that are extracted from a mine from about 100 years ago. In June, I have a joint solo show that's going on between Micah and with Alchemy of Art in Baltimore. So I hope you'll follow me on this journey. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Would anybody that's on like to ask any questions at all of Stephanie before she goes?
Yeah, I do, but I want to wait if there's a student maybe that wants to ask something. I'll go ahead. So I wonder what your thoughts are about agribusiness. We have agribusiness in our Central Valley, and it's part of, I mean, it used to be agriculture, okay? And then the culture part got stripped away and it became business. And, you know, I was thinking about your corn, your maple syrup, you know, situation there.
Yeah.
And, you know, over here, it'd be like, oh, we don't need maple syrup. We got corn syrup. It's easier to make. It's cheaper to make. We can make way more, you know, and it's cost less to the consumer. And, oh, we can make it taste like maple, you know, like.
Right.
I mean, how does that make you feel, you know, like?
That's a great question, because it delves into kind of where I stand in my own personal practice and how I believe I line up as an individual with my art. And it's been something that I've explored and still exploring. I think a lot of people are and should, in terms of having an open mind to information. You know, I started this conversation today talking about that, like what was my carbon imprint, right? And like what am I showing? What am I doing by, you know, spending the money, the gas, the energy to do this show? And just environmentally, you know, how do I kind of line up? Am I aligned with my actual practice? So I agree. I saw a comment. There is nothing like real syrup, and if you haven't had that taste test, you need to. You know, go to your store and buy both.
Amy, I don't know. I kind of I'm thinking I remember the first time I had maple syrup instead of like your like fake, you know, syrup for pancakes. And
right. We went to graduate school in Canada, so it was like, you know,
yeah,
like
of course.
maple syrup was like it was sacrilegious to have generic syrup.
Yeah, and we always grew up with corn syrup that was flavored with butter stuff.
Flavor,
and,
yeah.
You know, and
There's-
it was fine, but we didn't know any better. But when we had the maple syrup, we were like, man,
right.
this has been right there on the shelf my whole life, but it's always really expensive, you know?
Yeah.
Very
So,
expensive.
what you're talking about is that triangle, right? That's that sustainability triangle. And I think that's part of what I want to do by bringing these ideas into the gallery. And I can't tell you where to place you in that triangle. You know, it's like I suggested, even with the gas, like right now our budget might be closer to like just getting to work every day, you know, needing to get gas, or needing to at this point invest in a bicycle and just bike to work. So, you know, I can't tell my viewer where to stand on that. I'm looking, instead of taking kind of a social justice perspective, for you to explore that and consider that.
Remind us about the triangle. It was there was an economic factor to it.
Mm-hmm.
And what were the other two factors in that triangle?
People.
People, yeah.
And place. So
Place.
the earth. So where, like geography, where you're at,
Yeah.
that feeds in. Because as you mentioned from your example, like what you're experiencing right now at College of the Sequoias is probably a very different experience than kind of the culture and community that you might find in Canada, where, you know, your neighbor could be, you know, owning a sugar farm or running a sugar farm there. So that's, you know, again, it really is up to you're the center. You know, I view these as kind of concentric circles around you.
Javier, did you have a question at all?
Yeah, I understand what you guys are saying pretty clearly, but I just want to know so you use kind of like the outdoor stuff that you find to make artwork out of?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I do buy my steel. So I purchase the steel. I do hand source everything that you see. Like I just finished up a show at Washington College on the Eastern Shore here, and I spent a year gathering. It was an invasive species. There was another show in Baltimore at Motor House. I spent a full year. I took this one plant through its full cycle for a year, and gathered it myself. I don't have an army. I don't have a team of interns. It's me. But that's, you know, that is how I know myself. That's how I learn. That's how I understand things. And again, if my work is talking about or addressing labor in any way, I want to understand that from a very personal place.
I think another thing too that's really interesting is hearing both Lindsey speak about her work, and a major part of her process is being sustainable and economical. She's in Minnesota, and in northern part of Minnesota. So for her, the landscape and environment is such an integral part in what she's making. But then also making, and with response to the pandemic, it was like all of a sudden the resources to purchase materials became very limited. So she really started to look within her own home and with resources around her to source as much as she could. And like your story of going running and being receptive to, but you're receptive to your environment, and that your actions in that environment or place are influencing or reciprocating into your studio practice.
Yeah,
similar with Lindsey, and that she was sort of mentally needed to take a break and would go on walks, and the cycle of the year and how the weather changed and the lack of snowpack, and then late snowpacks versus warmer winters, and the changes that she was incurring. I feel like that's what I know when all the faculty sort of reviewed applications and saw your work, and when I saw Lindsey's work, I sort of felt like they had a very interesting dialogue, even though that the pieces that are in the show are new for you and they're new for her, but there's still like, there's just an incredible conversation that's happening between materiality and surface quality, and also then your personal sort of integration into how the pieces came about. So that's really exciting to hear that there's so much continuity between your practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you mind just briefly sharing a little bit about, like, as you've sort of weathered the storm of the pandemic in your studio environment, like, has like the space that you're working in, has that changed? Have you had to adapt and evolve in any other ways that, I mean, I know for our students are merging into their careers and being scrappy and resourceful and receptive to change is going to be something that's really important for them to sort of
yes, I am willing to share some more kind of personal information probably than that, which I'm hoping can be maybe inspiring. So I understand that a lot of your students there are there for 2 years, or might transfer, or have that goal of transferring to a 4-year college. I want to tell you that that's how I got started with art. That I was in high school. I had taken, actually through college, I had taken one art class, one ceramics class in high school. And that was it. And I was kind of set on this science path, and I had, science and art are run parallel in terms of exploration, in terms of testing hypotheses, in terms of material exploration. So all of that kind of snowballed, but it wasn't until about 10 years ago that I started getting my own artwork out. And I wanted to learn, and I wanted to learn better and faster. And yes, I had been kind of immersed, and my family had been immersed in art. So I was very fortunate kind of to have that mindset. I grew up outside of DC, so I every Sunday, I would be at museums.
Right.
But that, how I got started was taking one night class of Art 101 at the community college here. And I did that for basically 2 years, for like 3 semesters, okay? You'll never see my artwork from those semesters, but I loved it. And I couldn't, it was all drawing. My aunt, who's a big mentor of mine, who is actually out on the West Coast and is a big public artist, public sculptor, I came to her and I was like, where do I start? How do I start this? And so she had encouraged me to start taking drawing classes. And so that's how I got started, and I couldn't learn fast enough. And then I transferred to Micah. And and if you're in Baltimore, I was in Bill Schmitt's post-baccalaureate program, and it changed my life. He changed my life specifically because I finally found someone that, as I drew, or as I tried to get my ideas, articulate things visually and through words, okay? I found someone who didn't laugh at me, okay? Who kind of said, okay, maybe try this, maybe link up with this teacher, keep your mind open, right? And so that mentality was critical. It's critical every day of my life now. And I owe him a lot for those conversations. He knows that, but and he's since retired, at least from teaching. You can follow his art practice too. But what I can say to that is that there will always be people and things to get in your way. We are all busy. We all need to make ends meet, okay? There have been times when I have been living out of my car through this. But the one thing I know is my art. And the one thing I know is my curiosity. And so I keep going back to that. The last thing I'll say to that, which again, I'm being like totally transparent here, but again, I was the students there, okay? I feel like am on that journey. I've been on that journey. Is that I have had a mentor who I brought up an idea to, and she looked at me and she said, stay in your lane. That's what she said to me. And I was like, okay. And I thought a lot about that, because like, obviously if I brought it up, I was a little nervous about bringing it up, but brought it up, and something wasn't right. Like I'm pointing like this, like my soul, like who I am, I had to explore this thing. I was thinking about it. It was on my mind. I was considering it, right? And I wrote a grant for it. I applied for a grant for it to the Puffin Foundation. And I mean, so the punchline to this is that I got the grant. I mean, the Puffin Foundation has an amazing reputation, does some incredible work, supports a tremendous number of artists. And they supported me as I experimented with movement outdoors. And that brought me so much confidence and grace. And it brought me a reminder, right? That you have to listen to yourself. You have to. And again, you're gonna have a long list of shoulds and shouldn'ts, and you just have to kind of go back to you. So.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, because I mean, I truly feel that, I mean, I know for both Matthew and I, as artists and as teachers and educators, like there's like this really delicate balance. But I think for so many of our students, it's, you know, we were there too as community college students, and the struggle is definitely real.
Yeah.
And but I really appreciate you sharing the realities of but also the victories along the way, in the sense that, you know, when you persevere and you push through and you have that drive, you can accomplish a lot.
Yeah, it's little by little.
Yeah.
One day at a time. One day at a time.
Any
Yeah.
last questions for anybody?
You gave that wedge of red oak a lot of dignity. And I wonder if you could help me with something. We in our neighborhood, we have these giant multi-hundred-year-old oak trees. They're called valley oak trees. And we have an ordinance in the city so that they will thrive and be protected, so that people can't just cut them down for no reason.
Yeah.
But one of these oak trees apparently was struggling, but we couldn't tell driving by this, walking around the neighborhood, looked fine. But one day, when we walked by, the oak tree was like, it was gone. It was like, what's missing here? Like something was missing. And Amy was the first one to experience it. And it's like, oh my gosh, where's that tree? You know, it was huge. And just majestic tree in the front yard of this, giant front yard of this old house. And yeah, it got taken down. I talked to the guy because I was curious, and I was like, what happened? Man, that tree was amazing. He's like, yeah, I know, but it was hollowed out. It was gonna, there were parts that were gonna fall on our house, and they were all worried about it. And I was like, it was just devastating. I just felt like it was devastating. But to make it even more devastating, whoever was contracted to come out and like remove the tree, they had to like chop it down, and
Yes.
and it ended up just being this enormous pile. I think the pile of wood it wasn't stacked, it was just rubble. It was like a building fell down. And
Yeah.
it was, I don't know, it was like maybe 8 feet or more tall,
Yeah.
maybe 10 feet tall, of just rubble, just big hunks of the wood. And it really just devastated me, because the way that it was cut made it to where the wood wasn't that usable to actually build something out of, because
Yeah.
a lot of it was totally good. So there were the chunks were like too small, but of course that wood is super dense and they're very heavy.
Yeah.
So I would go, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're touching on all the things that my art does in terms of the sense of permanence and impermanence, the
Yeah.
sense of loss, the sense
yeah.
of like presence and loss.
Yeah.
The sense we talked about, kind of that carbon footprint, right? Think about how much gas and energy and physical labor went into, taking down this tree and then transforming it into something that, mulch emits much more carbon than sucking it up, right? So even if they had left it, it probably would have done the world a little better. But really, the catchy thing about your story to me too is that labor piece. Is who and why are we choosing the labor that we do? And kind of what's, there's a lot of irony in it in terms of land claim and going back through history for that.
That
So,
oak tree had
yeah.
that oak tree had a more dignified claim of that land than that house. I'll tell you that.
Yes.
And there's nothing special about that house. It's just like, but that oak tree was incredible. And
But they're tied together too, right? In
Yes.
terms of lumber, in terms of what is used for and its function and its purpose. So
I went over there one day.
Things to consider.
I went over there one day with my dad when he had his truck over at the house one day. I was like, hey, can we go down the street real quick? I'm gonna go see we can take some of these chunks of oak tree out of there. And I went over there and the guy was like, yeah, you could probably pick up some of these. They're a lot heavier than they look. And you can load up your truck. He's like, I've had a lot of people asking me about this wood.
He was so frustrated with people.
So frustrated because it was going to take forever for his yard to get cleared of it.
Yeah.
Because of the labor needed to remove it.
Right.
And it wasn't that usable, So it's like you could have gotten rid of this in a more dignified way if you instructed the crew that tore it down to do it in a way that made it, still have value.
Yeah.
So now we have, some big chunks, like chair-sized chunks of this oak tree. And I've had them under a tarp in the winter, and I'm going to open them up and let them air out and dry out. And I'm like, what are we going to do with them? I don't know what to do with it. I just felt like I had to
save
save something dignified in some way that's unforeseen.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. And when you decide after considering, please feel free. I would love to see an image. Shoot me a photo of what you create.
I don't have an intention to make art out of it necessarily. I'm thinking like maybe we can use it in our backyard. My boys are getting into where they're jumping on stuff, so we can make it into like some kind of like
functional
course. or maybe we can make furniture out of like pieces of it. I don't know.
Or a memorial, one or the other.
We'll make a sculpture out of it and we'll take it back to the site and we'll put it there and see how long that homeowner will tolerate it.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie, for your time. Does anybody else have any other questions? Seems like we're all right. Okay, so there will be a recording of this that will be available on YouTube, and we'll post those links to the different videos on our social media sites for Facebook and Instagram, and just I appreciate you so much, Stephanie, taking your time and sharing your work with us.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you. Good luck to you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.